So the other weekend, I had a chance to operate on Jack Gutsch's HOn3 layout called the Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley Railroad. Jack has a Facebook page. You can see it's called the Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley Railroad. If you'd like to follow him, you can see what he's been up to. This railroad um, is basically the Chicago Northwestern's narrow gauge railroad that was out in South Dakota around the Blackhills area. If you look on this map here, you can see that little beehive nest of mountains over there on the western side of South Dakota. That's where the railroad is. So when we come into the room here, we can see that there's this scene where the ore is processed from the mines, and then behind that, there's that low hill there. There's a three-track standard gauge staging yard. So as you enter the room, then turn to the left, you see this long, kind of narrow room. It's a purpose-built room built for the railroad. It's basically at the end of his garage. So this is the town of Deadwood, South Dakota. It's where the narrow gauge interchanged with the standard gauge. You can see the yard that the interchange was done. It's those three tracks, and then the fourth track on the left there actually is the CB&Q interchange, and it also goes down to the depot. And my first train was actually a narrow gauge passenger train, and it is actually sitting on the far left track. You can barely see the end of the coach. So that's going to be my first train, and we'll kind of follow my train around the layout, and I'll describe some of the things I've seen. So as the again, as we come into the room here, you can see I'm just panning through the interchange area and then the processing area. And that little hole there that we just patched, that was to access the standard gauge turnouts. And we come into Deadwood, South Dakota here. There's a small roundhouse. It's all dual gauge. In the front there, there's the coal loading tipple for the steam locomotives. You can see here some of the overview of the yard area there and the town in the back. It's pretty neat how it's separated by a river, and that river kind of cuts down back through the turntable lead. There's the depot, which has both standard and narrow gauge. You can see my little narrow gauge train is sitting there, and a couple box cars for the CB&Q. And then as we head up the line here, this is all dual gauge, passing a little mine. And then we go to this really neat junction here where the main line had to cut through the new main line cuts through the old main line, and they just cut out a piece there. We come in here to another mine here. Could be a processing plant. Forgive me if I get that wrong. Circle around to the point where now you see two lines branch off, and the one in the back is staying on the upper level, and the one in the foreground is going to circle down to the lower level. And you can see here now they've separated. One of the things you'll notice in the fascia here, he's got the fascia covered with a carpeting, and it's really kind of a nice feel when you're in there. The layout edge is actually soft, and you can stick anything you want to it. So this is actually a switchback to reach the mines on the lower level, and the foreground track is what came up from that junction we just saw. Kind of comes into this area and works back through a couple of legs of the switchback and down into this long twisty line where there's these two pretty cool mines down here. All this is prototype. He's got photos that show all this stuff here. Um, he's also got a book that when you come in kind of gives a history of all the areas scene by scene. Back on the upper level here, we go past another mine and we keep climbing up this grade. And as we reach the top up here, there's a little low trestle there, and then a couple more mines there. And then we come into the scene of a Y, and this Y is really pretty neat because it's just kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and you can see the upper level just ends at this small little depot. And the way he's got it laid out, it really has a unique, very remote feeling when you're here. There's just this one lone kind of structure, and then the line just pretty much ends. Now, what you're looking at here is the standard gauge yard at Leeds, South Dakota, and it crosses on a removable bridge section from Deadwood. And it's got this really cool, kind of really compact yard here that you come in and you work. And then as you look back here, as we pan to the left, you see this this other, I think it's a processing plant. But this is a recreation of a famous postcard of an image taken by Leland Case. And the photo is of three bridges where there's a streetcar crossing on the bottom, and then you got the standard gauge, and then up on top you see the tram. Here we can see the lead South Dakota depot, and then a little bit of the town is on the back side over here as we pan across. All the track in here is dual gauge. Another scene, kind of a quick overview of the town. If you actually look on the boardwalk down there, you can see the photograph. The famous photograph is actually being taken. And then you can see that piece right there that sticks out. That's where the bridge from the other side of the layout is inserted to connect both pieces. So here's the first train out of the yard here at Deadwood, and this is a narrow gauge locomotive, and it's pulling actually a car that's got narrow and standard gauge couplers on it. And it's going to go up and work both standard and narrow gauge cars. Again, you can see on the right there, my narrow gauge passenger train is sitting at the depot, just waiting for this train to get a little further up the line. So I didn't actually videotape leaving the depot there. I had to do a backing move, but here I am here. I've just left Deadwood, and I am now making it through the first junction here. So unfortunately, I didn't have the idea to videotape my entire train where I went up to the end of the line up there on the upper level and turned on the Y. But here's my passenger train making its return trip back down after I turned around. And I'm just kind of making my way. I had to pass another local working up there. And so this is my train coming under one of the mines here before I go back onto the single level part of the layout. Now, if you're wondering why the locomotives say D and RG on the side, they're actually Blackstone models. And Jack's point of view is that, well, they just run so good and nothing's made for his railroad, so he's just going to go ahead and use them and just be happy with them. And you can't really argue with them because they run so darn good. Here's the standard gauge yard job in Deadwood, and it's actually clearing a line for me so I can get my train up through. I've actually brought the passenger train back to the depot, and I ran a standard gauge train out, which you can see on the foreground track there. But now I have to get my standard gauge locomotive up through the yard and go turn it on that turntable so I can go back to staging. And so what the yard job did was he had to clear out a middle line there so I could make my way through.
Alrighty, got track through for you, Jeff.
And so here is my standard gauge locomotive. And I'll be backing through the yard on the dual gauge track.
All right, so I talked to Andrew about having the infill guys over and kind of doing this is what layout orientation, this is what he wants to do. And he says,
that day there were 6 of us operating. That's Jack in the background right there. He is going to clear a locomotive off the lead there so I can get up in there and turn around. He says the railroad operates mostly with five-man crews, but we made room for one more.
you should try, we should try that sometime.
I was happy just to sit and watch most of the time. It's a pretty fascinating operation, and the layout really has a great feel of just being in South Dakota in the mountains. So here I am backing onto the turntable. And that was my little hiccup there on the track there. I stopped the locomotive for some reason.
Throw it again.
I wonder whose turntable this is. It works really well. It's got a Bachmann controller on it.
May just be a motor that he hooked up to the turntable.
It's kind of a neat scene the way, if you look on the left-hand side, there's a wooden trestle on the turntable lead as the river kind of cuts across and comes down in front. Here's another shot of that neat scene. This is my standard gauge train now leaving town. I'm going to cross that river, and then I'm going to go along the coal dock there. the period that Jack models has these really small steam locomotives that aren't really much bigger than the narrow gauge, and sometimes it's hard to tell what you're doing.
Bill Henderson, who did all
It's
those
really hard on the
stories for us.
turntable knowing which rail to actually line
Oh
up.
yeah.
Sometimes you forget if you're on the
Those
left,
were
the right, the
fascinating.
middle.
I always enjoyed reading those.
Whatever happened to him? He kind of just disappeared.
Yeah,
So
as
here I
of
am now
a
going to
couple years ago,
enter
he was still around,
the
but he
staging
just
yard, and the foreground tracks go down to the ore
fluorescent.
processing docks,
Not
or
like a
plants, I
telephone.
think they are.
You had
So
helicopters
we
that
look
fly
down
over.
here, you can see a mine train backing its way down. It had just worked through the switchback up there, and now it's backing down through this really neat scene here. That's just a single track. The feeling of just the mountains here really is impressive. If there's one argument for modeling HOn3, this is it. It's the ability to capture these deep scenes. Here's that same locomotive now. It just came up through that middle track there on the switchback and is moving back up towards a little yard area there where it's been working. And then when it's all done, it'll actually go up the far left track. So here we can see it's kind of backing down there. Again, it's on a stub track. It's on a switchback leg. The turnouts on the narrow gauge side here are operated with like a finger flick. And that's because if you look at, you can see the blue fascia right below the layout there. That's actually the wall of the garage. So as I close out this video, I just like to go ahead and thank Jack for having us over to operate on this layout. It's a great layout to operate on. And I'm just going to go through some pictures I took. Again, if you'd like to follow Jack's progress on his layout, you can go ahead and search Facebook for the Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley Railroad.